There's a warning stamped on this interview. Not a legal one, not a content disclaimer. It says the audio should not be reviewed more than once. No explanation, no definition, just a note added later in a different hand marked psychological risk. That warning wasn't issued because the inmate was violent. He never raised his voice. He never threatened anyone. It was issued because somewhere in the middle of the interview, the direction reversed. The man answering the questions stopped being the subject of the evaluation, and the people in the room didn't notice right away. The interview took place in a maximum security facility in November. Routine post-conviction review. One psychologist, one inmate, cameras active, audio clean, no missing time. The inmate had been in custody for 6 years. Model behavior, no incidents, no signs of delusion. According to the file, he was cooperative to the point of passivity. The interview begins exactly how you'd expect. Basic questions, short answers, long stretches of nothing worth remembering, which is why the moment it shifts almost gets missed. At 9 minutes in, the psychologist makes a small mistake. She corrects herself and moves on. The inmate doesn't. He gives the correct date, calmly, casually. What the transcript doesn't explain is how he knew it. That date wasn't in his file. At the time, the psychologist writes a single word in the margin: attentive. She doesn't realize yet that she's the one being evaluated. That realization comes later. A few minutes later, the psychologist asks him about authority figures. It's a standard question, meant to gauge compliance, resentment, emotional distance. He answers before she finishes speaking. Not just the question, the direction of it. He talks about tone, about posture, about the way people adjust their voice when they think they're in control. He mentions that she leans back when she's comfortable, that her grip tightens when she's unsure. The camera confirms both. She smiles, half out of habit, half in dismissal, makes a note, redirects. This kind of observation isn't unheard of. Some inmates pay close attention. It doesn't mean anything by itself. What follows is the first thing that doesn't fit. He asks her how long she's been assigned to this facility. The question isn't inappropriate. She answers vaguely, then reminds him that the interview is about him. He nods. Then he says, "Then you weren't here in March." She pauses. He adds, "For the one they don't talk about." There's a shift in the room, not dramatic, just enough to register if you're looking for it. She asks him to clarify. He doesn't. Instead, he apologizes, says he forgot she wasn't supposed to know about that yet. She writes something down, but the note is later crossed out. In the copy I saw, whatever she wrote there is unreadable. She redirects again, this time more firmly, asking about the people affected by his crime. For the first time since the interview began, he hesitates. 7 seconds of silence. Then he says, "You should check your phone after this." She tells him personal devices aren't permitted. He agrees, says that's not what he meant. He explains there's been an accident on the highway outside the facility. Traffic's already backing up. Her commute will be longer than usual. She doesn't react. She marks it as deflection and moves on. 3 minutes later, an officer opens the door. There's been a multi-vehicle collision on the northbound highway. Staff are being advised to plan alternate routes. The inmate doesn't react. The psychologist does. It's subtle, a tightening in the jaw, a breath held half a second too long. From this point on, the notes change. They stop summarizing answers and start recording behavior. Timestamps appear, body language, silences. The interview continues, but it's no longer routine. The psychologist asks him where he learned to read people like that. He tells her he didn't learn it, says it's easier when people forget they're being watched. She reminds him the room is monitored. "I know," he says, "that's who I meant." For the first time, she looks at the camera, not directly, just enough to acknowledge it's there. She asks him to explain. He doesn't. Instead, he asks whether she remembers the analyst who handled evaluations before her. She tells him she's familiar with the name. He gives her a different one, a name that doesn't appear anywhere in the inmate file, not in staff records, not in evaluation history. Later, that name is traced to a senior analyst who retired quietly years earlier, someone whose involvement in inmate assessments was never disclosed publicly. The psychologist asks him how he knows that name. He tells her she asked better questions. That's the first time his tone changes. Not louder, not aggressive, just certain. She presses him, asks whether he's spoken to anyone else about these ideas. He says no. Then he starts describing another interview, different room, different facility, years earlier. He mentions details that match a sealed case, down to where the interviewer placed their notes on the table. The psychologist interrupts him, says that interview never happened. He nods, says that's why it was easier to remember. The analyst reviewing the footage later rewinds this part several times. You can see the cursor hover, play it again, slow it down. Because the inmate isn't recalling a memory, he's correcting one. The psychologist takes a breath and asks him when he first realized something was different about him. He considers this. Then he says, "When they stopped asking if I understood the questions and started asking if I remembered them." She asks what the difference is. He leans forward slightly. "Understanding," he explains, "is for people inside a system. Remembering is for things that existed before it." The room goes quiet again. This time, the silence isn't confusion, it's caution. The psychologist breaks protocol next. It's not obvious unless you know the framework, but the question she asks isn't on it. She asks him what he thinks he is. He doesn't answer right away. He looks at her hands instead, how they're folded now, tighter than before. Then he looks past her, just slightly, toward the corner of the room where the camera is mounted. "You're asking the wrong question," he says. She asks what the right one is. There's a pause, longer than the others. Then he says, "You should be asking whether I'm allowed to stay." That's the moment the analyst later flags as the reversal point. From here on, the inmate stops responding to questions as if they're prompts and starts treating them like checkpoints. The psychologist asks him what he means by stay. He says alignment isn't permanent, that it degrades, that most people never notice because the correction happens quietly, through routine, medication, isolation. But sometimes, he adds, it doesn't hold. She asks what happens then. He tells her someone notices the overlap. She asks him to define overlap. He closes his eyes. For several seconds he doesn't speak. His breathing slows. The biometric data shows a drop in heart rate that doesn't match stress or deception. When he opens his eyes again, he seems focused, not on her, on something else. "There are patterns that repeat," he says, "not events, positions." He explains that certain places make it easier to track them. Prisons, hospitals, schools, anywhere people are reduced to roles. She asks which role he's filling. He answers, "The one that watches." That's when her voice changes. She asks him if he believes he's dangerous. He shakes his head. "No," he says, "I'm stabilizing." She tells him there is no system that needs stabilizing. He smiles, not small this time, not warm, just brief. That's what makes it convincing. She looks down at her notes, writes something, then stops, crosses it out, and quietly, so quietly it almost doesn't register, she asks him a question that doesn't sound clinical at all. She asks, "What happens when something doesn't belong?" He doesn't answer her. Instead, he says, "That depends on how long it's been noticed." The audio degrades slightly here. Not enough to lose clarity, just enough to feel wrong. She asks him if he's talking about himself. He looks at her. Then he says, "Not anymore." The interview was supposed to end there. According to the schedule, they were already past the allotted time. The psychologist reaches for her notes, closes the folder halfway, and says they'll continue another day. That's when he speaks again. She hasn't asked a question. He tells her there was another interview in March, different inmate, different room, one that didn't make it into the system because the outcome wasn't usable. She says she doesn't recall anything like that. He nods. "That's part of the correction," he says. "Memory goes first." She asks him what happened to the inmate. He answers without hesitation. They removed the part that didn't belong. She asks how. He doesn't respond right away. Instead, he watches her face, carefully this time, like he's checking for something. Then she asks, very quietly, "Does it hurt?" It's the first time she sounds afraid. He looks past her again, toward the camera, toward the corner of the room that never moves. "It usually does," he says. That line does not appear in the official transcript. 90 seconds later, the door opens. An officer steps in and says administration has requested the session end immediately. No explanation. The psychologist doesn't argue. She gathers her papers, stands too quickly, and leaves the room without looking back. The inmate remains seated. The camera continues recording after he's escorted out. 3 full minutes of an empty room, a metal table, a chair rocking once, twice, then stopping. After that, the records stop agreeing with each other. The psychologist requests reassignment the same day. Her access badge is deactivated within the week. Officially, she transfers departments. Unofficially, her name stops appearing in evaluation logs entirely. The analyst who reviewed the footage submits a supplemental report. It's flagged, returned, rewritten. The original version is marked non-compliant and removed from circulation. It ends with a sentence that doesn't appear anywhere else. It says the inmate's statements show consistency across unrelated cases. It says replication should be avoided, because replication implies continuation. The inmate himself is transferred less than 48 hours later. No destination listed, no receiving officer, just a status change. Further interviews are deemed unnecessary. And yet, the analyst's notes continue to update. Not observations, not evaluations, reminders, dates, times, short entries written months apart, as if someone keeps checking the same condition. The final note is dated almost a year after the interview. It doesn't mention the inmate. It reads, "Subject remains stable. Replacement not required at this time." That's the last line in the file. And that's why this interview was never meant to be released.